I want you to just think for a second about this subtle, almost physical tension you might have noticed recently.
Yeah, that underlying anxiety.
Exactly. It's this sense that the world feels, increasingly brittle or tense, but then on the surface, nothing has actually stopped working.
Right, like you go to the supermarket and the shelves are totally full.
Yeah, or you open your laptop and the internet is blazing fast. I mean, shipping logistics, global finance, these massive new AI models, they're all just humming along.
They are. But underneath all of that, there's this creeping feeling that something foundational is shifting. Like the actual operating system of our world is quietly changing gears.
Which is exactly the mission of our deep dive today. We're looking at a really fascinating set of analytical
The
texts.
GOA-33 framework.
Right, the GOA-33 texts. And we're using these sources to unpack this quiet, massive transition we're going through. Basically, we are moving out of an era defined by universal connection and sliding into an era defined by selection.
And before we really dig into the mechanics of that, I think we should establish some ground rules for this deep dive.
Oh, definitely.
Because, it's so easy to fall into these typical panic narratives.
Yeah.
But we are deliberately stepping around all of that today.
No conspiracy theories.
Exactly. No simple the rich get richer tropes. And definitely no survivalist doom prepping.
Right. We're keeping it calm.
Yeah, we're just calmly looking at how the structural reality of the world actually operates. And the core premise from our sources is this. The system is not collapsing. It's just changing the minimum requirements for you to be allowed to stay connected.
Okay, so let's trace how we actually got here.
Okay.
Because for, the last 50 years or so, globalization had a very clear directive.
Right, expansion.
Yeah, exactly. It was all about expanding, lowering the costs, laying down more fiber optic cables, building more shipping lanes.
Getting a smartphone into every single hand on the planet.
Totally. It was this almost ideological commitment to just growing the pie and increasing the speed of connection for everybody. But our sources argue that this era of connection expansion is effectively over.
It's hit a wall.
Right. The dominant challenge for global systems is no longer figuring out how to connect everyone. The new problem is figuring out where to allocate a limited supply of high-quality connections.
And the driver behind this paradigm shift is a concept that texts call the velocity mismatch.
The velocity mismatch. Break that down for us.
So on one end of the spectrum, we have these high-speed operating systems. I mean, we're talking about global algorithmic financial markets, artificial intelligence training networks, high-frequency data grids.
Totally digital stuff.
Right. These systems demand instantaneous, increasingly faster synchronization. They basically want to move at the speed of light.
Yeah.
And theoretically, in a purely digital space, they can.
But the friction is that they don't exist in a vacuum, right?
Exactly.
Because they live on physical servers, which are powered by physical energy grids and cooled by physical water. It's like installing a massive, hyperfast fiber optic network. But the power plant feeding it is still just shoveling coal.
That is a great analogy.
Yeah.
Because that physical reality, it simply cannot scale exponentially.
Right, you can't just spawn a new river.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Energy grids, water supplies, land permits, global supply chains, even just human cognitive capacity, they only grow non-linearly, and they require immense physical friction to upgrade.
So you have a digital layer demanding infinite speed, just slamming into a physical layer bound by the laws of thermodynamics.
Yeah, and that bottleneck right there, that is the velocity mismatch.
Okay, so if the physical world can't keep up with this digital speed, where does that friction actually show up? Because I think we tend to visualize bottlenecks as like a traffic jam where everyone just slows down together.
Right, like an equal opportunity delay.
Yeah, exactly. But this framework suggests something much more aggressive. It's less like a traffic jam and more like converting a public highway into an automated express lane where the toll price changes by the millisecond.
That's spot on.
Right.
The friction shows up as structural prioritization. Resources aren't just disappearing, but they are being heavily, aggressively prioritized.
Because the high-speed systems just use their capital to guarantee their own access.
Exactly. We actually see this mechanism operating in real time right now. Take energy grids. When a massive AI data center sets up in a region, it doesn't just, plug into the wall and hope for the best.
Right. They aren't just hoping the lights stay on.
No, they execute these incredibly complex smart grid contracts with dynamic pricing algorithms. So when the power grid faces extreme strain, say there's a massive heat wave, the algorithm just automatically outbids the residential zones for the available wattage.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the data center never goes offline. Instead, the surrounding suburban areas quietly experience a brownout, or they see a massive surge in their utility rates to compensate.
So the system is optimizing entirely for the entities that can afford to maintain that required speed. The AI model gets priority routing for power. The massive financial hub gets priority for municipal water to cool its servers.
Exactly. The resources are just being aggressively rerouted to the top.
Which, I mean, that forces us to completely redefine what infrastructure actually means.
It really does. Because historically, infrastructure was valued simply by its existence, right?
Yeah, like a paved road existed, so anyone could drive their car on it. The postal service was there, so anyone could mail a letter.
Right. Access was just the default state. But the sources point out that infrastructure is now being rearranged based on what they call synchronization capability.
Meaning your right to use the infrastructure depends entirely on whether you can keep up with the rhythm of the dominant high-speed system.
Yes. And a great place to see this play out is in global logistics. The old model of shipping was basically a guarantee. You pay the fee, the package will arrive.
Right, maybe a day late, but it gets there.
Exactly. But today, logistics networks are shifting toward managing the probability of arrival.
The probability.
Yeah. Global supply chains have become so fast and so complex that turbulence is just guaranteed. So the market is actively prioritizing actors that possess what the texts call uncertainty tolerance.
Okay, I want to break down how that probabilistic model actually functions on the ground because I feel like it perfectly illustrates this shift to selection.
Go for it.
So, imagine you are a massive global retail conglomerate, right? Your AI supply chain management is monitoring thousands of variables in real time.
Constantly synced.
Exactly. And if a major port suddenly backs up, your system just automatically reroutes your shipping containers to a different continent. It buys emergency air freight space at a huge markup, and it just absorbs that margin hit across your billion-dollar portfolio.
Right. You have immense uncertainty tolerance.
But if you are just a local hardware store, your inventory is sitting in one container on a single ship. If that port backs up, your container just sits there for 3 weeks.
And your cash flow dries up.
Yeah. You miss a quarter, and your business folds. The global shipping network is technically still working, but it's evolved to a speed where it only functions for entities that can afford that friction.
The hardware store is just quietly filtered out.
Yeah.
And, this sorting mechanism is leading directly to what the texts refer to as the authentication-based society.
Authentication society.
Yeah. We are abandoning this idea of a universally open internet and open markets in favor of these highly closed networks. It requires strict access controls, thick trust layers, and continuous digital verification just to participate in the basic economy.
Wait, I actually need to push back on that a little bit.
Sure.
Because let's look at the explosion of VPNs, zero-trust network architectures, all these closed digital ecosystems. We are constantly dealing with state-sponsored hackers, ransomware gangs shutting down hospitals.
Massive data leaks.
Exactly. So isn't this authentication society just a basic cybersecurity reflex? Like, we have more threats, so we just build higher digital walls. Is this really some grand philosophical shift towards selection, or are we just reacting to bad actors?
It's a great question. And security is absolutely the public justification, and honestly, it's a valid one.
Right.
But the sources argue that we need to look beneath that threat narrative at the underlying structural driver. And that driver is the escalating cost of connection.
The cost of connection.
Yes, maintaining state-of-the-art cybersecurity, paying for continuous compliance audits, upgrading your server speeds to stay perfectly synced with a zero-trust network. It is incredibly expensive.
Oh, I see. It's a massive tax on participation.
Exactly. It's a financial moat disguised as a firewall.
Yeah.
The intent doesn't even have to be malicious. There's no smoke-filled room of elites deciding to lock out the little guy.
Right. It's just the math.
Yes. The cost of keeping a node perfectly securely synced with the global system is rising exponentially. And if you can't pay the toll, whether that toll is capital, compute power, or algorithmic compliance, you don't get a polite little error message.
Your connection just degrades.
Precisely. You can't bid on the corporate contract because you don't have the required cybersecurity insurance tier.
Yeah.
You can't access the supplier network because your software can't interface with their new API. You are quietly selected out.
Which brings us to what I think is the deepest and, frankly, most unnerving insight in these texts.
The loss of reconnectability.
Yes. Because when we worry about the future, we usually worry about temporary disconnection, right?
Like losing a job or a power outage.
Yeah, the internet going down for an afternoon. But the structural threat we are actually facing isn't just disconnection. It is the permanent loss of reconnectability.
This is documented in the sources as the OS compatibility error.
Take that down.
So high-speed algorithmic systems, the AI networks, automated trading floors, global logistics grids, they require constant, uninterrupted synchronization. They demand 2047 uptime.
Right, machines don't sleep.
Exactly. But human beings and the communities we build, we are what the texts call the living membrane of society. And a living membrane requires the exact opposite of 247 synchronization.
We need pauses.
Yes. Pauses, delays, rest, and recovery.
I mean, we have to sleep. We have to take time off to care for sick family members. Sometimes we need a month just to learn a new skill. We are biologically and socially incapable of constant synchronization.
And that's where the friction occurs. Because the high-speed system writes the rules of engagement. When the high-speed operational system interfaces with the human physical layer, it creates this chronic incompatibility.
I want to walk through a really specific example from the sources to make this tangible for you listening, because I think this is the exact mechanism driving so much modern anxiety.
The mechanic example.
Yes, the local mechanic.
Yeah.
So imagine a highly skilled local mechanic who has spent 10 years running a successful independent shop.
Right.
They use specialized diagnostic software that's hooked into a global automaker's digital network.
Very standard these days.
Exactly. But then, one day, the mechanic has a severe health crisis and has to spend 2 months in the hospital.
So they step off the treadmill.
Yeah.
Sure.
During those 2 months, they miss a massive mandatory algorithmic recertification process for that diagnostic network. And they fail to pay the newly increased quarterly licensing fee.
Because they're in a hospital bed.
Right. But from the perspective of the high-speed network, that node simply went dark, and it was purged to maintain system integrity.
It just cleans house.
Exactly. So when the mechanic recovers and tries to reopen their shop, they don't just, log back in.
Right.
The software vendor informs them that regaining access requires purchasing an entirely new $50,000 hardware suite and undergoing a 6-month retraining protocol.
Because the system architecture fundamentally changed while they were asleep.
Yes. The mechanic hasn't just lost 2 months of income. They have permanently lost their reconnectability. They are priced out of their own profession, forced to shut down the shop, and pushed into a lower-tier gig economy.
And, that user journey scales up to the macro level, too. It actually drives the behavior of massive institutions.
How so?
Think about why major corporations are throwing billions of dollars at AI initiatives right now, even if they don't fully understand the tech yet.
Oh, because they're terrified of falling behind.
Yes. They fear the loss of reconnectability more than they fear burning capital. They know that if they miss this synchronization window, the global supply chain will evolve so rapidly that they will never be able to interface with it again.
Wow. And we even see nations behaving this way, right?
Oh,
It's
yeah.
like a country realizes it doesn't have the energy grid or the capital to connect its entire population to the high-speed global economy. So, rather than risk total irrelevance, the government locks into what the texts call fixed partial connections.
Right, they triage.
Yeah, they take all their resources and they harden one specific sector, maybe a single megacity financial zone or a specialized tech hub.
And they ensure that one node stays perfectly synced with the global AI and financial markets.
Exactly. While quietly accepting that the rest of the country's infrastructure is going to be left in a lower speed, degrading tier.
You can actually visualize this dynamic using what the sources call the global membrane map.
Membrane map.
Yeah. The world is basically sorting into distinct layers. The top layers, the AI data centers, the major capital flows, the elite urban centers, they are hardening.
Right, securing their power and priority routing.
Exactly. And at the bottom, the outer layers, rural regions, manual labor, localized everyday life, they are thinning.
But the real danger zone is that space in between, isn't it?
The middle layers, yeah.
Small and medium businesses, local schools, regional hospitals, independent contractors. These middle layers are just caught in the sheer between a high-speed world that demands perfection and a physical world that demands grace.
They are the ones chronically losing their reconnectability.
And yet we rarely talk about it in these terms, which brings up this really fascinating concept from the texts called silence detection.
Yes, silence detection.
Mm.
The idea that this massive structural lockout is happening right in front of us, but society actively mislabels the symptoms.
We call it a cost of living crisis.
Exactly.
We look at the mechanic whose shop closed and we say, inflation got him, or he just couldn't compete with the big dealerships. We write off structural exclusion as a personal failure or just routine market forces.
And by misdiagnosing that friction as simple price inflation, the deeper truth remains largely invisible in public discourse.
Mhm.
The actual possibility of reconnecting to the core economy is shrinking.
It's a silent crisis.
Yeah, because it doesn't manifest as a spectacular collapse. It just manifests as a slow, quiet erosion of access.
So if we want to spot this shift happening in real time, if you're listening and want to see this, where do we look? Where is this friction, this shear between the high-speed OS and the human membrane actually heating up right now?
You have to look at the contact points. Look at local employment filters.
Like algorithmic hiring.
Exactly. Hiring algorithms have become so rigid, requiring such a specific, unbroken trajectory of high-speed synchronization, that a candidate with a non-traditional background, someone who took 3 years off to raise a child, for instance, they can't even get their resume parsed.
Because the machine can't compute a gap in synchronization.
Right. So they are filtered out before a human ever even sees their name. You also see it in vendor ecosystems, like your mechanic example, where the cost of software compliance outpaces the revenue of small enterprises.
So basically, the friction heats up wherever a nonlinear human life tries to plug into a hyperlinear digital system.
Exactly.
It really paints a picture of a society that is quietly abandoning the premise of keeping everyone connected. And not because, like, a villain pressed a button.
No, it's just math.
Yeah, it's happening as a direct mathematical consequence of chasing speed. To keep the elite nodes moving at the speed of light, the system is actively shedding the weight of the middle class and universally accessible infrastructure.
But, if we accept that this gradient is pulling us toward a world of hardened, exclusive nodes, we have to ask if it's an inevitable trajectory.
Right. Are we just doomed?
Well, the framework in our sources doesn't view this as a deterministic doom loop. It actually outlines structural alternatives.
The reversal conditions.
Yes, specific reversal conditions that could change the gradient.
Okay, so if the core problem is the rising cost of synchronization and the loss of the margin to return, how do we begin building what the texts call a reconnectable society?
The first pivot has to be infrastructural. We need massive investment in lower-cost, decentralized infrastructure.
Makes sense. Lower the toll price.
Exactly. If we can lower the baseline energy and tech burden required to maintain a node, more players can stay on the board. And this connects to a second priority, which is expanding local autonomous networks.
Like microgrids for energy, right, or localized food supply chains. Systems that can operate independently and don't need to ping a global server every millisecond just to function. So if the global system hiccups, or if you just can't afford the new API access, your local town doesn't instantly go dark.
Precisely. But the most vital reversal condition is institutional design. We have to build markets, safety nets, and corporate structures that explicitly tolerate low-speed connections.
We need systems that recognize that OS compatibility error and actively build buffers into the code.
We have to design pathways that allow a worker or a small business or a community to step away, pause, and safely resync later without facing permanent lockout.
Because a civilization that loses the ability to pause, that optimizes entirely for raw speed over the margin to return, it will eventually harden into something incredibly brittle.
And history tells us that brittle systems, no matter how fast or computationally powerful they are, eventually shatter.
Right. I want to leave you with a thought to carry into your week, building on this idea of human biology colliding with algorithmic speed.
It's a big collision.
It really is. If our high-speed economy now demands 24/7 synchronization just to maintain access, but our biological bodies strictly require sleep and pauses, what happens to the human baseline?
That's the real question.
Are we marching toward a near future where basic middle-class survival requires biological or digital enhancements? Will you be required to deploy an autonomous AI digital twin that keeps your nodes synced and generating value while you sleep, just to ensure you still have a job to wake up to?
It's definitely something to think about.
Absolutely. So when you read the news tomorrow, don't just look for stories about supply chains breaking or inflation numbers rising. Look for those shifting membranes. Pay attention to the digital toll booths quietly raising their prices. Look for the places where the requirements to simply stay connected just got a little bit harder.